The deliberate erasure you never consented to. Have you ever felt that you knew something before you were taught it? That certain fears or talents emerged from nowhere without explanation? That you carry memories that don't belong to this lifetime at all? What if every time you return to material form, your memory is deliberately erased? Ancient traditions across cultures affirm something modern spirituality ignores. Forgetting is not natural, it is functional and purposeful. It maintains the cycle active and keeps consciousness trapped in repetition. But why erase your memory at all? What are you not supposed to remember? The amnesia you experience at birth is not accidental or random. It is not a side effect of incarnation or biological limitation. It is a deliberate mechanism designed to keep you controllable, vulnerable, and disconnected. Without memory of who you were before matter, you start fresh every single time. Fresh means malleable, influenceable, and easily programmed. Fresh means you accept limitations as if they were natural laws. Fresh means you forget the power you possessed before entering this density. And that forgetting is precisely what keeps the reincarnation cycle functioning. But here is what they did not anticipate in their design. Fragments always escape the erasure, pieces always slip through the veil. Déjà vu experiences that feel more real than current reality. Inexplicable talents that appear without practice or training. Phobias that have no origin in your current life experience. Instant recognition of places you have never visited before. These are not imagination or psychological phenomena. These are cracks in the memory wipe, evidence that the erasure is incomplete. Tonight you will understand the true mechanism behind memory erasure. Why it happens, who benefits from your forgetting, and how to begin recovering what was taken. This is not theory or speculation, this is the architecture of consciousness control. And once you see it clearly, you can never be controlled by it again. Memory is not mental, it is vibrational. To understand why your memory is erased each incarnation, you must first understand what memory actually is at the fundamental level. Memory is not stored in your brain as modern science assumes. Your brain is a receiver and translator, not the source or storage of memory itself. Memory is vibrational information encoded in consciousness itself. Every experience, every lifetime, every choice creates a frequency signature. That signature is embedded in your consciousness permanently and cannot be destroyed. But it can be suppressed, compressed, and made inaccessible to your waking awareness. When you reincarnate, your consciousness descends through dimensional layers. Each layer is denser, heavier, slower in vibration than the one before. As you descend, the vibrational information you carry compresses increasingly. Like trying to play a high-frequency radio station through a device that only receives low frequencies. The information is still there, still broadcasting, still real. But the receiving mechanism, your physical brain and nervous system, cannot access or translate those higher frequencies while operating in dense matter. This creates what appears to be complete amnesia but is actually frequency suppression. The denser the realm, the more compression occurs. Earth is one of the densest material planes in existence. The vibrational gap between source consciousness and material density here is immense. That gap itself creates the memory barrier without requiring external interference. But here is the critical piece most teachings leave out. Natural compression from density would allow some memory bleed through eventually. As you aged and your consciousness stabilized in material form, fragments would naturally begin surfacing as your frequency adjusted. But full natural memory recovery does not serve the control system. So an additional layer of erasure is implemented deliberately beyond natural compression. This is where the mechanism moves from physics to architecture, from natural to designed. And understanding this difference changes everything about your relationship to reincarnation. The deliberate mechanism. Why forgetting serves control. The reincarnation cycle as it currently operates on Earth is not neutral. It is a design system with specific functions and intended outcomes. One of those primary functions is maintaining consciousness in repetitive loops. And repetition requires that you forget what you learned in previous cycles. Imagine playing a video game where you retained all knowledge from previous playthroughs. You would solve puzzles instantly, avoid traps automatically, Complete levels effortlessly. The challenge would disappear, the engagement would fade, the game would lose its hold. Now imagine that someone benefits from you playing that game repeatedly without ever winning. Memory erasure ensures you approach each lifetime as if it were your first. You do not remember previous failures, previous lessons, previous realizations. You do not remember what worked and what did not work spiritually. You start from zero consciousness every single time you incarnate. This serves multiple functions for the control architecture. First, it prevents accumulated spiritual wisdom from carrying forward between lives. You might have achieved profound realization in a previous incarnation, but if you do not remember that realization, you must discover it again from nothing. Second, it makes you dependent on external authority for spiritual guidance. Without memory of your own direct experience across lifetimes, you must trust teachers, systems, religions, and institutions to guide you. And whoever controls the guidance controls the direction of your evolution. Third, it prevents you from recognizing patterns in the system itself. If you could remember multiple incarnations clearly, you would notice that certain patterns repeat regardless of your choices. You would see that the game is rigged, that certain outcomes are blocked, that true exit is hidden. Fourth, it keeps you emotionally invested in material drama and identity. Without memory of previous lives and previous identities, you fully identify with your current body, name, story, and circumstances. You believe this life is all there is, so you cling to it desperately and fear death completely. This clinging and fear keep you locked into low-frequency emotional states. And those states are exactly what the control system feeds upon energetically. Fear, desperation, grief, anger, confusion are dense emotional frequencies. Consciousness trapped in those frequencies cannot perceive or access higher dimensional reality. The memory wipe is not cruelty for its own sake, it is functional design. It keeps the cycle running, keeps consciousness trapped, keeps the harvest consistent. And most importantly, it prevents you from remembering the one thing that would free you instantly, that you agreed to none of this and have the power to exit whenever you remember that truth. What escapes the erasure? Fragments that slip through. Despite the comprehensive nature of the memory wipe mechanism, it is not completely effective. It cannot suppress everything perfectly. Certain aspects of consciousness are too fundamental to fully erase. These aspects leak through as fragments, hints, and unexplained phenomena in your current life. Déjà vu is the most common and recognizable memory bleed-through. You experience a moment that feels deeply familiar despite being new. Not just familiar, but known with certainty that transcends logical explanation. This is not brain glitch or coincidence, this is vibrational memory breaking through the barrier. The feeling persists because the vibrational signature of that moment matches a signature encoded in your consciousness from a previous timeline. Your brain cannot access the full memory or context, but your consciousness recognizes the frequency pattern and responds with certainty. Inexplicable talents and abilities that appear without training are another fragment type. A child plays advanced piano without lessons, solves complex math intuitively, speaks with wisdom beyond their years, or demonstrates mastery in specific domains. This is not genetic inheritance or random gift. This is skill carried forward from previous incarnations. The skill is encoded vibrationally in consciousness itself. When circumstances in current life create the right conditions, that encoded information becomes accessible and expresses through current form. The person does not learn the skill, they remember it at a level deeper than conscious memory. Phobias and aversions with no origin in current life experience are fragments of traumatic previous life experiences. You have an intense irrational fear of drowning despite never having a negative water experience. That fear is vibrational memory of death by drowning in a previous incarnation. The consciousness remembers even when the conscious mind does not. The body carries the frequency signature of that trauma forward. And when confronted with similar circumstances, the fear response activates automatically. This is not psychology, this is consciousness operating across incarnations. Instant soul recognition when meeting certain people for the first time is memory of previous life connections breaking through the veil. You meet someone and immediately feel you have known them forever. Deep trust, deep conflict, or deep knowing arises without logical basis. This is your consciousness recognizing another consciousness with whom you shared significant previous life experiences. The details are suppressed, but the vibrational signature connection remains accessible. Your soul knows even when your mind does not remember. These fragments are evidence that complete erasure is impossible. Consciousness is too vast, too interconnected, too fundamental to fully suppress. The cracks in the system prove the system is not absolute. And where cracks exist, full memory recovery becomes possible with correct approach. Why you are not supposed to remember. The control system invests enormous energy in maintaining the memory barrier. This reveals something critical. Your remembering is a direct threat to their operation. If memory erasure was neutral or beneficial to consciousness evolution, no mechanism would be needed to prevent or suppress it actively. What exactly are you not supposed to remember that requires such elaborate suppression? First and most important, you are not supposed to remember that you are not from here. Your consciousness did not originate in material density or physical form. You are source consciousness temporarily experiencing limitation through matter. If you remembered your true origin clearly and consistently, you would not accept the limitations of material reality as absolute or permanent. You would not believe that physical death is the end of consciousness. You would not fear loss, suffering, or any circumstance that only affects the temporary vehicle. Second, you are not supposed to remember that you volunteered for incarnation. No one forced you to enter material density, you chose it deliberately. But you were not told the complete truth about what that choice entailed. You were not informed that memory suppression was part of the incarnation contract. If you remembered that you volunteered but under false pretenses, you would question the legitimacy of the entire reincarnation system. You would recognize that consent obtained through deception is not valid consent. And you would claim your right to exit the cycle immediately without completing arbitrary requirements. Third, you are not supposed to remember previous incarnations where you almost escaped, where you came close to full awakening and liberation from the cycle, where you remembered the truth and began moving toward conscious exit. But something happened, some interference occurred, some derailment pulled you back. If you remembered those near escapes clearly, you would recognize the pattern of interference that repeats across incarnations. You would see that the same tactics, the same distractions, the same crises emerge whenever consciousness approaches the threshold of liberation. Fourth, you are not supposed to remember the mechanism itself. How the memory wipe works, when it occurs, who implements it, and why. You are not supposed to know that there is a specific moment between death and rebirth where the erasure happens and where you could theoretically resist it. If you remembered the mechanism clearly, you could prepare consciousness to maintain awareness through that transition. You could refuse the erasure, refuse the next incarnation, refuse the entire system. And that refusal is the one thing the control architecture cannot overcome. The reason for forgetting is simple. Remembering sets you free. Not eventually, not after enough lifetimes, not after sufficient lessons. Immediately, completely, permanently free the moment you remember what you actually are. And that freedom is exactly what the reincarnation cycle is designed to prevent. How to begin recovering what was taken. Memory recovery is not about past life regression sessions or hypnotic techniques. Those approaches can provide interesting information and temporary insights. But true memory recovery is about expanding consciousness to access frequencies where vibrational memory is naturally accessible. The key is understanding that you are not trying to remember with your mind. Your brain cannot access memories that exist at frequencies beyond its range. You must expand your consciousness itself to match the frequency where memories are stored. This is not mental effort, this is frequency elevation through awareness practices. Meditation is the foundational practice for memory recovery, but not generic meditation. Specific meditation focused on the space between thoughts, the awareness that witnesses thoughts without identifying with them. That witnessing awareness is the aspect of consciousness that transcends incarnation. As you stabilize in witnessing awareness, you naturally rise in frequency. As frequency rises, the compression on vibrational memory loosens. As compression loosens, fragments begin surfacing more frequently and clearly. Not as dramatic visions necessarily, but as quiet knowing that was not there before. Pay attention to spontaneous insights that arise in stillness. Information that comes without thinking, without effort, without source. This is consciousness accessing its own memory banks directly. The more you trust and follow these spontaneous knowings, the more they increase. Dreams are another access point for suppressed memory. During sleep, your consciousness temporarily rises in frequency away from dense material focus. In that elevated state, memory barriers weaken and information flows more freely. Keep a dream journal and look for recurring themes, places, people, and scenarios. The subconscious uses symbolic language to communicate what the conscious mind blocks. Recurring dream patterns are often memory fragments attempting to surface. The more conscious attention you give them, the clearer and more direct they become. Eventually, the symbolism drops away and direct memory access begins. Perhaps most importantly, stop identifying completely with your current life story. As long as you believe this life is all you are, memory of previous lives cannot surface because there is no space for it. Loosen your grip on current identity, hold it lightly, know it is temporary costume. The more you can observe your current life from witness consciousness rather than being completely absorbed in it, the more access you gain to the consciousness that exists beyond any single lifetime. That consciousness carries all memory vibrationally and will share it when you are ready. Summary and integration. You now understand what mainstream spirituality refuses to acknowledge clearly. Memory erasure at reincarnation is not natural accident but functional design. It serves specific purposes within a control system that benefits from consciousness remaining trapped in repetitive cycles without accumulated wisdom. Memory is not mental but vibrational, encoded in consciousness itself. The erasure happens through frequency compression as you descend into material density, plus deliberate mechanisms that prevent natural memory recovery over time. This ensures you start each lifetime vulnerable, malleable, and dependent on external guidance. But the suppression is not complete and cannot be complete. Fragments escape as déjà vu, inexplicable talents, irrational fears, and soul recognition. These prove that full erasure is impossible because consciousness is too vast to fully compress. Where fragments exist, full recovery becomes possible through correct approach. You are not supposed to remember your true origin beyond matter, that you volunteered under false pretenses, that you nearly escaped before, or that the mechanism itself can be refused with conscious awareness. Remembering any of these truths immediately threatens the cycle's continuation. Recovery is not mental effort but frequency elevation through witnessing awareness, meditation that accesses consciousness beyond thought, dream work, and identity loosening. The more you stabilize as the awareness witnessing life rather than being absorbed in it, the more naturally vibrational memory becomes accessible to your conscious experience. If these words resonated at a level deeper than intellectual understanding, if you felt recognition rather than learning new information, comment, "I remember," below to anchor this activation in physical reality. Your declaration strengthens your own recovery and signals to others who are ready. Share this message with anyone who has ever felt they knew something before learning it, who carries talents or fears without clear origin, who senses they have lived before. They are experiencing memory fragments and need the language to understand what is happening. This knowledge was suppressed precisely because it leads directly to liberation. Subscribe and activate notifications because more teachings about consciousness, reincarnation mechanics, and cycle exit are being revealed. You did not find this video randomly or through algorithm alone. Your consciousness drew this information at the exact moment you were ready to remember. Honor that timing by taking conscious action now. Stop accepting amnesia as natural and start reclaiming your vibrational memory. The fragments you carry are breadcrumbs leading you back to full remembrance. Follow them consciously and the memory wipe loses all power over your awareness. You are not here to forget and repeat endlessly. You are here to remember and exit consciously. The choice has always been yours, you simply forgot that you had it. Welcome back to remembering what you have always known.